Yeah, I'm Jackson. I have zero experience with carpentry.
I studied at a school for historic preservation in Boston and learned about how things were built, 250 years ago.
There's a long way to go. I'm nowhere near the top. Not that I thought I was, but there's so much more to do out there.
Welcome back to a spooky episode of the Passion for Craft podcast. Headphone warning. We are going to talk about some scary stories, some horror stories that we have heard or seen or heard of on the job. But I'll leave that up to the discretion of these two, whether or not they want to say that they've heard about it or they've actually experienced it, to preserve the identity of their clients, which will all use their first and last names.
And addresses.
There's a horror story for you guys.
I've got probably when I think of the idea of the horror stories, I think of some early things that I did that were pretty bad and that I had to go back and fix and stuff like that. I remember one time very early on, I had this job and there was a deck.
You know it's going to be good when he can't finish his sentence.
This is the comedy hour, not the horror story. But I was thinking about it the other day because I was sitting there going, what was I thinking?
I've got one of those. A couple of them, actually.
So we did this deck, and we had this porch, this walkout porch, so this master could walk out over the this downstairs area. And it was, a 3 or 4 foot deck. We put plywood down, and then I
already off
clearly didn't know what I was thinking, and I put tar paper down and then nailed it down. So basically I had a water tar paper isn't even a waterproof membrane that you would put down.
Like a roof
tar paper. A roofing tar paper.
What is it there for? Just to hold roofing tiles
so
in place?
Tar paper was something that was, you would have the amount of you'd have like 30-pound tar paper, you have 50-pound tar paper, I think you have 10-pound tar, and it was all about the impregnation of tar into this paper. And it was used on the outside of these houses always as a vertical rain screen, not really not certainly a horizontal one. And so,
because at the end of the day, it's still paper.
Yeah, and there's a waterproof membrane, the tar impregnated into it, and you can get a heavier weight of it, but it's not a water
plastic.
No, it's not a waterproof like TPO, or it's not a roofing membrane. It's not
Is it to just keep the shingles off the decking of the roof? Because I know when we do flooring, I don't do flooring in my business, but when I've done flooring at my house, the flooring people have always been like, "Hey, they have the rolls of it. Yeah. Put it under the floor."
Yeah, so it helps with air infiltration. It helps with just moisture coming up through there. It helps with, okay. It doesn't prevent. Anyway, and then we put tile on top of that. Okay, so
outdoor.
Wait. You put OSB or
It's probably plywood. It could have been OSB.
Okay, so some kind of subfloor. The tar paper.
Yeah, and then
tile.
Yeah. So
how do you attach it to paper? Is that this nightmare?
So we did a waterproof mortar bed and then just set the tile and grouted it. Now I had probably been in business
on paper.
Probably not that long. Probably 5 years.
And you weren't going to be in business for much longer.
Yeah. And so the guy called me back 2 weeks later. No. It was like 5 years later, 3 or 4 years later. And he said, hey, my deck's leaking. And I was like, yeah, let me come over and look at it. And then I was like, by this time I'd done enough. I was like, what the heck was I even thinking?
And you're like, this is one of the practice ones.
And I said, I mean, obviously I'm fixing this and ain't going to make it right. This is not done right. I don't know what I was thinking. But I was thinking about that because we had another job where the waterproof of the deck, and I had forgotten that story completely. And then I remembered, I was like, oh my God, what in the world, Brent, were you even doing? I mean, I can't believe it lasted 2 or 3 years. I mean, it should have lasted 2 months, right? I mean, the second rain, it should have been leaking. And, it was years before he called me back. And I was just like,
you must have used one of the higher proofing of tar.
My gosh. But I mean, this beyond the stupidity of it, just the putting tar paper down and then every 12 inches you had a nail holding it down, that you just punctured your own thing. Anyway, it was that's my horror story that
you're puncturing your waterproof.
Yeah.
So this tile floor was a floating floor on top of that paper.
Richard, don't ask too many questions.
I'm just I'm like picturing walking on this thing and like it's just cracking like.
Yeah, I'm sure it did.
Cracked,
I'm sure it did.
And that's how the leaks happen.
No, I mean, look, if you had a month where it was raining a lot, you figure if it doesn't rain that much, the rain hits that tile, it soaks in, the mortar gets wet, everything's kind of wet, but it's sunny the next 3, 8, 10, 12 days, or in Texas 2 months, and so there isn't a rain problem. Mm-hmm. But you have a month of May when it's just raining all the time. And, probably by the second or third rain, it's gone through the tile, gone through the mortar, impregnated everything, and then, all hell breaks loose. But yeah, no, that's that's one horror story. I've got more.
I don't know if I told you all this spraying. You all remember my spraying nightmare? No. It was in Brent's.
Are you saying spraying?
Spraying like paint.
Oh, spraying, yeah.
It was in Brent's favorite city, Plano, Texas. And no, it was just
in case you guys don't remember, Richard used to do trim and paint as a turnkey deal.
Yeah. And when I first started my business, we did the home and garden show. Yeah. We did the one in Fort Worth and then one in Las Colinas.
That is a nightmare.
Yes, that is a nightmare. Standing at that booth all day with these like tire kickers. And
trade shows. There's a horror story.
And the funny thing is, I had all my MDF profiles on the desk. I thought they were good. I didn't know about anything, so it's just like look
what I can do.
Yeah,
like now you're sitting there going, "What was I thinking?"
Look at my sticker collection.
I think you walked by and were like, but I met these people at a home and garden show, and they're like, "Yeah, we want to do some trim." They just bought this house, and they had this like pass through. It was like a cased opening, but it was arched. So we did, no, it wasn't arched. They had an arched one and then like a regular flat top one. But we just did, they showed me a picture from Pinterest, of course, and we did that. So I was like trying to be Mr. Pro painter. Like, I'm going to get my finishes real nice, and all the good painters use oil base, So, and I didn't know anything about oil. I didn't know anything about proper masking off or anything of like containing the area.
Nice.
So I'm spraying. It's probably like maybe 4 or 5 feet wide. Yeah. 8, 9 foot tall area.
Just like an accent wall.
Yeah. Just like I just imagine like one of these things, but obviously not that detailed, but you just pass through it, just some panels. And so it comes to spray, and I don't even mask off the sides. So I just have like a little bit of masking, and I'm like, spraying this. And the guy, they're moving boxes and stuff, and he's like, "Man, that stuff's strong. That smells crazy." I'm like, "Yeah, it does. I don't even have a mask on." I'm like, this stuff's crazy, I'm like, "What is this stuff?" I'm like, "Well, it's an oil-based paint. It's gonna gel out real nice. Like the smell will go away, but the finish will be good, know." But all the overspray is like landing on everything. Like it's like snowing on this is a new house, new floor. And he's like, "I think it's getting on my floor." And like, and like, it's just me and John, these goofballs. We're like, it's like an episode of Three Stooges. It's like crazy. So I'm like, "Is it really?" And like, he's like, "Yeah," like he like takes this, because if you ever spray, I mean, you're atomizing the
Yeah.
paint. You're turning it into dust, basically.
Okay.
And it's not so bad with water-based, because
Yeah.
water-based, when you atomize it turns it into like a vapor.
Yeah.
By the time it settles on the floor, it's kind of dry.
Right.
Like you can kind of sweep it up.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
still, you need to mask off. With oil, though, it takes forever to dry, so it doesn't dry before it hits the floor. So there's all this like wet oil all over his floor, all through the living room, the kitchen,
Oh
the foyer.
no!
And I'm like, crap. And he gets a washcloth of water and like tries to
And
wipe
just
it up,
smears it.
because you can't clean
Oh,
oil with
yeah.
water. You
Oh,
need
yeah.
mineral
Paint
spirits.
thinner. Yeah.
So yeah, and I'm like, crap. I'm like, no. I was like, here, I got some mineral spirits. So we're we're cleaning it up. We got all these roll of paper towels, and we're cleaning it up. We got a trash bag.
Yeah.
We're like filling up the trash bag, and like right there where I just sprayed my thing, John is right there at the trash bag. The trash bag slaps the oil paint that we sprayed, pulls it off, leaves like this impression of the trash bag on the finish, and just like, I just wanted to quit, wanted to give up. So he's like, he walks over and he sees that like big trash bag imprint on the finish, and he's like, "Is that gonna come out?" I'm like, "I don't know, like, I don't know how this stuff works." Like he gave me a lot of grace though. Like I can't believe we stayed
my
there
gosh.
till like 9 at night with him, with cans of mineral spirits and rolls of paper towels,
Cleaning everything up.
wiping everything down. He helped us. He was on his hands and knees doing it too.
My gosh.
He was a really nice older guy. Like he was just so. I'm so thankful it was him.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that
Oh my
could have been.
gosh.
Get out of my house!
I'm suing you.
I'm
like,
suing you. Oh my god.
all this has to be replaced. We got it clean. It was
Dang.
I mean, it was. I mean, that's. I mean, you can't come up with a more scary movie than that.
I mean, literally
can't-
that story, you just kept saying a new thing, and I
Well-
was like,
what
I
I-
cannot believe that happened.
Well, what I thought you were going to say is that if you take mineral spirits or acetone or some of these other things and put them in a rag,
yes,
they get hot and they can
in the
start a
summertime
fire.
especially.
And I thought that's what you were going to say
I thought I
next.
was going to catch fire next.
And so I know my window guy. He was doing a job building his house. He
Sorry, one more thing.
they are
My nose started bleeding from not having a mask. I was like, he was like, you kept adding stuff on. I'm like, it was worse than that. Yeah, I had a nosebleed. So, sorry to interrupt. I had
then
to
you're
just
like
get that.
upside down.
Yeah, you're cleaning blood off his carpet too.
But that was the true horror of it. There was blood
There's
involved.
blood everywhere.
Anyway, he was building his house, and they were literally, a week from moving in. The sand and finish guys were there. They'd done it with poly. They used rags to wipe it up. The house burnt down.
Oh,
The house
because the
burned
rags.
Because of the rags. They were finishing the thing, and the house burnt down.
Oh,
I mean,
we
we were
soaked
laughing
your
about
rags.
some funny stories.
Yeah,
That
I mean,
sucks.
Oh, it's terrible. Can you imagine?
Who covers that cost?
Well, I mean, hopefully they had insurance. So there's what's called builder's risk insurance, which is an insurance to cover that exact kind of thing.
The process of building.
Yeah.
So you have to soak
just
your
like
rags
you have
in water.
homeowners insurance, right?
After you use them, you soak them in water.
Put them in a bucket of water.
Yeah.
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 Rags.
So anyway, builder's risk insurance. So, but I mean, going through the process of building a house and spending, a year or two doing it, and then getting right to the finish line, planning the movers, planning everything else, and then show up and it's burnt down. That would be a horror story.
That is a nightmare,
I
because
can't
usually
imagine
the
the phone call.
homeowner is like so ready to get in.
Yeah.
Dude.
And then you're like,
can you imagine that
no,
phone call?
you're going back.
my
You're going back to day
gosh.
one, and it's like,
If you can, and just to test the mettle of you as a builder or you as a, how you handle conflict, if you can make that call, you are a
Stud.
stud. I mean, that's a hard freaking call to make. I mean, no one wants to make that call, but yeah, you got to do it. You got to do it.
wow, yeah.
Do you think the insurance would cover a full new home?
Well, I mean, it depends
They
where the
should.
policy is written, but you get builder's risk insurance for a certain amount. So ideally $2 million house,
You get a $2 million
you get a total
insurance.
policy.
Yeah.
What you don't want is a
$1 million.
$1 million and a $2 million house. Then you're, sorry, that would be bad. So,
Wow.
Oh my gosh, that is crazy.
Yeah. I think the big lesson from that is soak your rags in water
yeah.
and handle them properly.
Absolutely.
There's videos of just like a shop, someone's like has a, they were staining something. They thankfully had their rags in like a metal container, and
Yeah.
it just shop footage overnight, just
Metal. Yeah.
just ignites.
Oh my.
That's you're not gonna know that
You're not
unless
gonna know.
unless you hear it from an experience, someone who's experienced. The only way you're gonna find that out is the hard way. Like if you're some DIY, I'm gonna
Totally.
stain all this, it's
Put up
That's
all the
scary.
rags. Yeah.
Well, and it's going away a little bit because most things aren't oil based anymore, and so you don't need those flammable materials to clean them up.
Do they
as
not
much.
like oil based anymore? Is that not a big deal?
Yeah, it's a really bad thing. I mean, I asked the painters. I talked to the painters on your jobs, like just to ask about their process. And I was like, "Do you like oil?" He's like, "No, it just hurts my lungs."
Mhm.
Like it is a health and safety thing. Like I would spray with shellac primer, which is a hardcore like if I spray if I set up a masking in
Yeah.
here and I like primed like this thing right here, and you came in without a mask, you would feel like your soul was going to depart from your body.
Yeah.
Like you would feel like I'm going to die.
Yeah.
And when I would come home, even after wearing a mask, I would like talk to Ashley, and she'd be like, you were spraying that stuff today. Like you could,
That's crazy.
stays
It's in
in
your
and-
lungs. Yeah, it just comes
Yeah.
out. Wow.
so the
The,
technology in water base is getting so good.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah,
They
that's
use-
what I was going to say.
Yeah.
I mean, historically, everybody used to say oil
Lead
base
only.
is so much better. Oil base is so much better. But the fact is that over the last probably 40 years, all the good things in oil based paints that would allow them to last so long have been taken out.
Yeah.
And so, governmental rules. I mean, lead in lead-based paint was an excellent material, and it worked.
Yeah.
And in the 70s they stopped allowing lead in paint.
I wonder
And so,
why. I used to eat it as
it's
a kid. Right?
yeah, exactly.
Off the side of the house.
Yeah, just peel them off.
So, yeah, those probably, that was probably a silly reason to stop allowing lead-based paint, right? Because it was rundown houses, and the kids were eating the paint because it tasted good. I mean, really? I mean, they're eating a building product.
Seems
I
like
mean,
a Tide Pod.
yeah.
thing.
It seems like a parenting issue, not a let's take lead out of the paint. And so, and that's my.
Yeah, and then these like
And that's why I ate it.
one of the finishes they're using over there at that one house that we're working on together.
The barn?
No,
Oh yeah.
I don't know what we can say or whatever, but
Yeah.
their team over there of painters that y'all have. I mean, he's spraying Benjamin Moore Advanced, which is like a really
they're-
good water-based paint.
Yeah.
Like the mantle, like I slide my hand across the face of the mantle, it's like
So smooth.
It's like butter. Yeah,
That's
I'm
so
like,
crazy.
this is nice. And
Is
then
that,
they're like,
does
"Don't
that come
touch
from like
mantle."
a good like?
Get your filthy hands off me.
Does that come from like the sprayer itself, or is it the paint quality that really makes a big difference?
It's both. It's the tip that you use. It's the operator of who's spraying it. Because when you spray, there's like a whole method of spraying.
Yeah.
Like if you ever see those spray how vehicles are painted, it's that robot arm like this that comes around,
Totally.
and it stays like 5 inches away exactly, and goes and overlaps 50% and moves at the right speed.
right.
The painter is like a huge part of that.
Mhm.
Then the spray tip, and then of course the paint, like
Yeah.
the technology.
The way it
of paint.
How it
aerosolizes.
dries.
Yeah.
it dries.
Exactly.
Okay.
It sprays on and like gels out. Yeah,
That's so crazy.
really crazy.
That high gloss paint that's over there at that job, I think that's going to be a fad that's going to go away. Now we're going to talk about fads and stuff like that, but the
On the ceiling.
yeah, I mean, just I like it, and it looks really contemporary and fun and cool and everything.
Yeah.
but that'll be a fad that will go away.
It's basically like a
Spoiler alert.
automotive shiny gloss
Yeah.
finish on your trim.
Yeah.
And they're doing it a lot on ceilings.
Yeah. And the cabinetry and stuff
And
like
it's
that.
really expensive too, because high gloss, basically, like all like imperfections in this table.
Totally.
If you spray this with the flat, like you'll see less of them. But if you spray it with a high gloss, you'll see more of what you don't even see now.
Oh, really?
So the prep work that goes into it is nuts.
So the table itself has to be like really sanded before. Is
It
that
has
kind
to
of the
be
deal?
like perfect. Yeah.
Really?
Or not, like if you spray like if you sand all this out, like, and then you spray high gloss and you miss this one, you'll see that one.
Oh my gosh, that's
It's-
crazy.
So it's a lot of work to get it.
But yeah, so you think it's gonna go away?
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
And I know you're a brushing guy, right?
Well, I mean, a lot of the designers we work with, the high-end ones, want brush
finish.
work because they feel like it gives a handmade appearance, and it does. I mean, there's a little bit more life to it. That you talked about the Robart arm spraying the thing,
Right.
They don't want a industrial look necessarily. They want a hand. Bespoke, handmade.
It's kind of the same idea of like the Victorian era. They had the roll-on templates, right? They would take the plaster and they would roll the pattern on it. Isn't that right?
They did do that.
Versus like a hand.
Versus like a guy going in the Georgian era, right? Before that, where they would hand carve all these little details into
Yep.
it. Like it's the same idea.
Yeah, it is similar. This is just that final layer that they want to see brush strokes.
Right.
So
And I would have to say, I've after seeing brush strokes done right, like usually when you think of brush strokes, you think of like these big, thick, like
Yeah,
like just gobs of like going up and down.
totally.
But when it's done right, which is an art in itself, it looks good. It
yeah,
looks really good.
if I'm, what am I, 6 feet from that thing, you probably don't see them yet, but you have to get a foot or two away to see them, and you're like, oh, okay, because there's a little texture there, there's a little bit of life in that thing, and so
cool.
it's subtle. is my
And
point.
your comment about things being too industrial too, like sometimes it's like now I'm looking at stuff like if you spray something, it does have like a factory finish, which is cool, but at the same time, if you have to like correct it,
Yeah.
well now you're masking everything off again, and you got to recreate that.
Yeah.
It's-
Factory finish.
yeah, you have to take it back to the factory essentially, versus like a brush could be hand touched up,
Right.
So
Would you
that-
just like sand off half the wall and do it again? Like, how would you fix a?
yeah, you would
And
take
some
like
of
a
those,
portion.
Yeah, you have to go
Like if
corner
you-
to corner.
Yeah, exactly. You just take like something that makes sense, like
Yeah.
from one style to another, you mask that off and just do that one,
Do the whole thing.
Yeah.
But
Wow.
if you had a surface that was as big as that wall, you'd have to go from edge to edge.
Which
to
happens
fix
on
it.
flooring too.
Yeah.
Like if you, like a lot of guys who do flooring, they
Yeah.
won't, like if you have a gash in your floor, they won't just correct that because they won't ever get the blend right. They need to do the whole thing. So it's nuts.
Wow.
What goes into finishing.
What are we talking about now?
Horror stories?
We're still on
Do you
horror
still
stories?
have any?
Yeah.
I
Um,
figured that was the case. I figured you got
Well,
more
it's
too.
cool because there's naturally like an education
Yeah.
into it,
Totally.
I think I guess when you first started when you first said horror stories, I mean, I think of the horror client, and the one that just makes your life.
Yeah.
But
I mean, that's a valid. I would say those are both. Yes.
and I'm sure
yes,
I'm
and.
sure there's people, the customer and the clients out there going, I can tell you horror stories about some contractors.
Oh, for sure.
And so they're
This one put tar paper under my.
The other one didn't even mask off my floor.
So there are, I think when we talk about this topic, I mean, I could tell stories about builders that, did things. I'm just like, what in the world are they doing?
Go ahead.
And then, about clients. And thankfully, I haven't had a nightmare client. I'm knocking on wood. I do not want a nightmare client. But I haven't had a nightmare client in years. Years.
That's awesome.
Now, the reason why I think that is because I've gotten better at saying no. I've gotten better at seeing those ones. As our prices raised and things like that,
It phases out a couple of them.
it phases out, some of those people who have, champagne taste and beer budget, they want all these fine things, but they can't afford them. Well, you should give me that. And, anyway. But I guess, from my perspective now, dealing with less, hard clients, I think of builders and hear the stories and the things they're doing. I mean, we're taking over a job right now for a ranch project where the previous contractor, basically ripped them off and just and I mean for,
that's a horror story.
Hundreds of thousands of dollars was kept pushing them off, telling them they had to change their engineering, telling them they had to change all this stuff. Wasn't even really sure why. The guy was doing that. It was kind of just a game he was playing with them, waiting for one job to finish so he could get over to this other thing, but just strung them out. He decided he didn't want to pay this guy anymore. The guy put a lien on his property that he owns, cost him $80,000 in lawyer fees to get out of it. It was just, you're just sitting there going, oh my gosh, that is just a nightmare. So
that is a nightmare. And I've heard that story.
How do you think you avoid that? Like, as a homeowner listening to this, like, how do you think you avoid a situation like that?
Well, I mean, it's hard because, it is a relationship, right? And so, at the end of the day, it's do you trust this guy to do this job? And this guy is very charismatic. I mean, he has a trusting quality to him.
Salesman type.
He's a total salesman that you trust and that you believe. And so it didn't really start dawning on them that they could be in trouble until,
they're in the thick of it.
Yeah, they've been 4 or 5 months into it. And these bills kept coming, and they would get these weird bills for, this guy driving out to their property, looking at something and turning around. He would send them the gas and hourly and these other bills, and they're like, couldn't this be organized a little bit different so I'm not paying, $2,000 for every trip this guy comes out?
Yeah.
Well, it's just like, what is like, and so then you start going, wait a minute, what is going on here? And so, and then as things kept getting pushed off, that's when they kind of figured it out. Good. But I mean, if they had called around, that's something that they didn't do, admittedly, is that this guy had done this before. Mm-hmm. And so if they had, asked around a little bit more, they would have realized that this was an MO that this guy had. So how could they have avoided it? They, a guy comes in, he's charismatic, you like him, everything he says makes sense because he's been doing this a long time. And, you don't end up taking those other steps because
there's no need.
Right.
Yeah. That makes sense. That makes sense why that would happen, why that would come to fruition. Just sucks.
Yeah, no, it's terrible.
Yeah, and it's kind of hard as the homeowner because if someone has a website and a portfolio and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, and they walk over and they know like
you've got no reason not to trust them.
What are you?
Yeah, and that is what you end up looking for. I feel like with home building especially, you hear a lot of these stories where you're like, this guy totally got screwed over. You're like, how did that happen? But I guess they're few and far between in comparison.
Yeah, I don't know. That's the real criminal sin there that the guy's really being, unethical,
stealing.
right? Then there's the other things where there's incompetence, right? Like my story about the doing the roof. One, you got to go back and fix your mistake, right? You got to stand behind your work. But two, there's a lot of incompetence out there. I mean, part of this Passion for Craft podcast is trying to raise the bar, and there's a lot of people that don't know how to build. And
what's that quote? Don't attribute to malice what stupidity can explain. Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great quote because I think it characterizes or maybe defines what's really going on in the building world is that people get pissed about is incompetence, and not some guy trying to be malicious. Because I'm sure that if I went and talked to this builder and asked him about this client, he would tell me why the client was messed up. Right.
Right.
Right. Anyway,
so more horror stories, boys. What do we got? Any crazy ones? Any crazy ones y'all have heard? Maybe we're done with horror stories. Maybe y'all don't have any more. You have.
I'm trying to think of one from that I heard from another guy, where
Trying to remember how it goes.
Yeah, how exactly it went. But basically, if I butcher it, we can edit it out. But so he was working for a remodeling company, this guy, and they were doing engineered flooring in the upstairs.
Yeah.
And engineered flooring, it's like, you can call it different, but it's a real wood veneer, but there's like
plywood underneath,
an eighth of an inch.
Yeah.
Some of them have a quarter inch.
Some right there.
Yeah. Some of them have a quarter, like the veneer, I guess, depending on what you pay for, can be thicker. And it's like how many times you can resand it before you start hitting plywood.
Right.
Then
that
you got to
makes
rip
sense.
it out. So they put this flooring in, and apparently one of the guys, like, who wasn't like familiar with the flooring sanders are crazy.
Yeah.
Like, especially the edging one who goes around and gets near the baseboard. That thing can take off on you. So apparently one of the new guys like burned through the floor.
Oh my gosh.
So they
Went through the veneer.
through the veneer and got down to the plywood, and the homeowners were like, this guy told me the homeowners were a nightmare.
Yeah.
But like you just said, I feel like the other way they would probably say these
Yeah,
guys
yeah.
are a nightmare. So he burned through the veneer on this, and basically they had to pull some of the flooring out, lace it back in, did everything all over. They had to sand the floor down around that area. So they got down, they weren't through the veneer, and then they stained it the wrong color. So they stained it the wrong color. And then the homeowner came and was like, "What is this? Like, what? This isn't the color."
No.
So then they tried to sand that off,
And then it
went
hit
through
the plywood.
veneer.
got through the veneer on everything, had to rip the floor out again. And they said that when they ripped the floor out again, it was like, since it was upstairs, they were like taking the flooring out, and they actually found a problem with the subfloor. So they had to take some of the subflooring out because they didn't redo the whole floor.
Right.
And then one of the guys fell through the drywall in the subfloor and like hit his leg on the ceiling fan or something. And like, and then they damaged like the whole staircase getting up. I don't know. The guy just told me this story
That wouldn't end.
the other day. Yeah, that's like, I don't know. It was crazy.
Oh.
So that was like, I mean, as he was telling me, it was like the one I was telling you.
Yeah,
Like,
it
it
just
just
keeps
keeps
happening.
adding up. And I'm like, and that's how it is when it rains, it pours. It's like, usually it's a little, it just goes on.
I've fallen through a drywall before. We had a really nice home, and I was just backseating. I was like kind of doing intern work, trying to figure out like see how it works and like see the behind the scenes of on the
This is
job.
on our
and stuff.
jobs?
This is on your job. Do you not remember this?
I kind of remember it.
he tried to block it out.
So it was a slower day. And so when I'm like I was an intern basically for one of the project managers. And so I was just walking around, just helping him out and like doing stuff. But really I was just there to see the job,
Mm-hmm.
And so I was just seeing jobs get done and seeing how he handled clients and all this other stuff. And it was a slow day, and I was pretty bored. And so we're walking around upstairs, and I'm in like one of the closets that hasn't been finished. And I'm walking across the baseboards or like the slats.
joist, yeah.
The joists. And I'd just been doing it for like 30 minutes, just back and forth. And I mean, I was just playing with fire. Sure, it had to happen at one point. And
like an obstacle course.
my toes hit the joist, but I didn't I put weight on my foot as if I was putting it in the middle of the foot, even though I only had it here. And I just went just straight through the floor. And I broke a rib landing on the thing. And I like pulled myself out really fast. I was like, oh, no. There's a giant hole through the middle of this where
man.
I mean, both my legs just dangling through the ground.
You broke a rib.
Yeah.
Wow.
It was like,
That is
it was
nuts.
bruised or broken, but like it hurt for the next like 4 weeks, 5 weeks.
Wow.
It was,
Yeah,
like
it's
every
probably
time I
broken.
breathed, I was like, like I would laugh and it would hurt. Anyway, but yeah. So
Thanks
I went
for
to
reminding me of that.
I went to that house later. Yeah. And then I got home and my dad was like, so, I heard you fell through the floor today. Anyway, I went to the house later and, the guy was like, hey, come here. And he
The
walked
project
me,
manager?
Yeah. So he walks me downstairs into the closet and he's like, check out this room. And I was like, we weren't doing work in this room. He goes, we started to because you fell through the floor here. And he points to the ceiling where their drywall has been patched. I was like,
Oh, so you fell through it in a closet.
oh, yeah.
Well, that's good.
And-
That's like the best place it could happen.
It wasn't a closet downstairs.
Oh.
It was right next to a chandelier downstairs. Do you remember that?
So I do remember that. When I first started, this is another horror story. My first job when I got back from North Bennett Street was I've been networking with this guy Tom Clark, R.I.P. He was a great mentor to me. Got me a bunch of work and stuff. He gets me this job building these doors for this Grapevine Depot. Have I told you guys this?
Mm-mm. Is
So-
this
Yes.
Longleaf Pine?
This is the Longleaf Pine.
This is the
thing.
Home Depot.
Okay, yeah. So that story doesn't just end with that story.
Uh-oh.
There's more.
There's more?
There's more.
So
This
everybody's
is awesome.
everybody's laughing about because I couldn't find Longleaf Pine. I went and bought, finished 3/4, clear pine and basically glued it all together to make my stiles and rails. Well, the same thing was the problem with the panels, right? So I had to glue the panels up to make these panels for this door. And sometimes when you glue things together, like pine can be brittle, and so the wood chipped out right where I was gluing the joints together. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and so I had a little hole, and they were stain grade, and so I couldn't just
What does strain
fill it.
grade mean?
Well, we weren't going to paint it.
Oh,
if we're
okay.
going to paint
Yeah.
it, then it could just be filled with putty, and
Yeah,
then
paint it over.
so I had to sand it down. And so I'm sanding it down, and it just, I probably should have put it through a planer, but I had a 4-inch belt sander, right? And I was sanding across the whole wood, trying to get that chunk of wood to go away, right? So
You were trying to feather it
I'm
out.
trying to feather it out, but it's right in the middle of the panel of the door.
I know where this is going.
And so I began to tilt my,
Oh, no.
tip the edge of my belt sander so that I can get that,
Really get that angle, yeah.
get that angle out. And I thought I feathered it out, and I was like, yeah, that looks pretty good. And I go to the job site, and they put finish on it, and just
Yep.
this gap. There probably is an inch wide and probably 4 inches long of this gouge, clear gouge, where I had been digging
Made
it out.
a trench in it.
And so the project manager, I'm a subcontractor, is looking at this, just going, how the hell am I supposed to sell this? And I'm sitting there, this is my first year
job.
year in business, first job. My eyes are like this big, trying to smile. The architects are coming through to look at the job, and they look at the door. It kind of is one of those things where they walk by and they, the double take,
Yeah.
and then they kind of walk up close to it. And of course, sweat. It's just breaks out over my body as I'm like, oh gosh, please don't make me rebuild this door. And he kind of rubs on it. He goes, what happened here? And I didn't say anything. I didn't say anything. And the project manager goes, I think they're sanding, and it just kind of the edge of the sander tipped it, and they just kind of went. They kind of, it was one of those explanations where they explained it, and they're like,
There's more here.
there's like, that's it. Well, and then they just kind of walked away. And so I was just like, is that it? Are they going to let it pass? They're going to let it pass. And I think I told you guys this I was late on something. This is something where I was showing up to that job and waking up at 4 a.m. trying
that guy was like on you.
Oh, on me. And so, at some point he broke and just said, this is the worst. Back. You don't know how to build a door if your life depended on it. I got an chewing. And, he was mad. but it was a lot of truth. I hadn't done just a great job. But anyway, that was my
One of your finest
That
work.
was my horror story.
Is that one in the
remember.
portfolio,
Yeah. That building isn't even there anymore. The Grapevine has grown so much that original depot has been moved somewhere else.
I wonder if it's because
it
of
was
that
too
door.
small.
Yeah,
They're
it
like, just
probably
knock
is.
it down.
No,
Yeah,
I
we gotta
told
get
you.
that out of it.
I went back.
You did them right.
3 or 4 years later and rebuilt all those exterior
Oh
doors.
yeah, you did say
And
that.
so,
Stand by your work.
You made me think of another horror story of mine that has to do with sanding and not knowing how to feather things out.
yeah.
Here's the deal. This is what's so interesting about this. Like for you, you're on the job. You're like in the mix, right?
Right.
So you're gonna remember a ton more of yours, but also I feel like we're not gonna get all of his because one, he's not gonna remember it, and if he does, it's gonna be like that patio instance where it's like when you call your teacher mom and you just think about it later, you're like, oh man, like dang it, you know what I mean? Like,
Oh, yes,
and they're gonna
yes.
just come flooding back, but we're not gonna have
Yeah,
as many.
it's real.
So
like,
we're really
you're
gonna,
like real ashamed and like embarrassed.
you're like,
Yeah,
God
just
dang it, I can't
oh.
believe I did that. I
Yeah.
can't believe yeah. But those are gonna be the instances that we're gonna have from him. I feel like, it's gonna be harder to like go back because really over time you're like, yeah, it wasn't that big of a deal. We fixed it. We did it right.
Yeah,
We,
you
like,
block it out.
you
It's a
block it
defense
out.
mechanism.
Yeah.
For you to move on, you have to like be like, okay,
Right.
I gotta like get past this.
Totally.
On
Totally. All right, so
anything in
go
life.
go ahead with your horror
Well,
story.
it's the same idea. I put this feature wall up of a grid layout. So
You can say
essentially-
accent wall.
No feature wall. No. Well, essentially, you have like a wall like this. Obviously, not to this detail, but basically just one bias.
Right.
Three quarter.
A bunch of one bys.
Yeah, no trim inside. And this is before, this is when I'm just nailing stuff straight to drywall.
Nice.
And if you ever put like a straight edge on drywall, it's usually not.
It's not.
Not straight.
It's you get there's some
Because
prep
the
work that
studs
goes
are
into it.
moving and everything else.
Yeah, so we're trying to make something straight onto this thing where you're basically fighting it. So I'm just, I got a nail gun. I'm all new, and I'm like, this is gonna be easy. I'm just like, just nailing these things together, and they're like if here's where a joint is, there's
Yeah.
like some that are like maybe an eighth, some maybe even a
They're like
quarter,
off like that.
like a quarter past each other. I'm like, I'll just orbital sand it.
So the rails weren't meeting the stiles where you were nailing them together because of
Correct.
dips in the wall. And so
Correct.
you're going to sand it out.
And I'm gonna sand it out. But I didn't know about feathering, so I just have the orbital sander just in one spot, just like, So I'm just like, all right, that's flush right there now. All right, let's move on to the next one. And they're flush there, but same exact thing.
But if you go across the whole thing, it just
You put paint on it. So we put paint on it, and it's just like, just this big orbital sander spot. It's a perfect circle.
Just a big
at
circle.
Every intersection.
You made a bunch of buttons on it.
So
Yeah.
in hindsight, you would have shimmed out the
yeah, what is the
stiles.
fix there?
That's when I started doing
Craig jigging it.
yeah, started pocket holing stuff. Now I don't pocket hole everything. I will shim stuff out, or I'll shim out and then nail behind.
What do you mean by pocket holing? Like pocket screws?
Yeah. So
Okay.
you just and then it makes sure that it's locked
And
behind.
so you would do it like behind
yeah,
together.
and that
then-
guarantees that they're flush.
Makes sense.
And even on that, I don't know. There's like you got to find a balance, because even if you do that and then you push that onto a wall that's all jacked up, it's still gonna it's weird. You just have it's like a case by case situation. Like,
Totally.
what is the best approach here? Let's put a straight edge on the wall. Oh, okay. Maybe I don't pocket hole this one, and I kind of try to shim this. It's weird, but there's a couple of fixes, and those are some. Yeah.
Cool.
Did I tell you about the lady who was drinking at that
Yes.
job? That was another horror
was a
story.
horror
story. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was during the client's always right episode.
Yeah. And you said she waddled. Your buddy said, your employee said something. Oh, you just joked with her, and she waddled back to the kitchen.
Yeah.
I remember that line.
Yeah.
And then she left him.
Yeah.
Left you guys alone. Yeah.
And I was terrified of her, because I'd show up at 8 a.m. and she was drinking. And I was like, ugh.
Here we go.
This
right?
is going to be
go.
fun. There's a story this guy was telling me about where a client bought like a $70,000 bath like a toilet, like a $70,000 like
Wow.
crazy toilet. And one of the subs went to the restroom in the toilet, just peed in the toilet, and then she was like, "Did someone use this?" And the guy was like, I don't know. There've been guys in and out of here. Maybe like there's a chance, but she's like, okay, we're gonna need a new one of these. And she paid for a brand new $70,000 of the same toilet. Isn't that crazy?
That is
We had a client one
psycho.
time that was that the wife said once you put it in, and it was about a $7,000 or $8,000 toilet, no one can touch it.
Yeah.
My husband's very particular about germs and things like that. No one can touch it. And so we were like, okay. So we put it in, and she said, I don't think anybody used it, but I think someone threw some like paper towels or some trash in there. And something happened where we had to go in and fix it. And she was like, okay, well, he's gone now. Go ahead and fix it real quick. Don't tell anybody. But there's some funky things about toilets that people
Wow. I
don't.
wonder what they do on a road trip because it's disgusting.
Totally.
Like the public restrooms.
That's such
you
a
know?
great thought because, like, what do you do?
Yeah.
If you're going
You gotta
to be
get
like
over
that?
it.
You gotta
Yeah.
get over it.
That's crazy. That's crazy that there's a $7,000 toilet and a $75,000. Like, okay.
Some of those gold leafed Cheryl Wagner things are really expensive. I don't
Just
know about
insane.
70, but they're expensive.
Yeah, I could be off on the numbers. I just remember the guy telling me the number, and I
It
was
could be
like,
$700.
"Are you kidding me?"
Yeah, 770.
Well, I just remember
it's the
like
same to
they
him.
were like, "Buy a new one of the same one,"
Right.
and the guy was like, "This isn't covered by like this isn't our fault." And the lady was like, "Yeah, that's great. Buy a new one."
Oh, she made them buy. a new one.
No. She bought a new one.
Oh, okay.
She was like, "It's so important to me. Like this is mine."
Wow, that needs to be the last thing in then, right? The toilet
I guess.
on that job,
Because what do you expect? It's a toilet. Like,
or install it and wrap it in plastic and put like caution
Sure.
tape over it.
seriously. Anyway, it is kind of crazy. Guys, any more crazy horror stories or
I'm
tapped out?
yeah. I
No other
think.
scary
Well,
things?
I've gone to therapy to block out a lot of them.
Yeah,
so.
that's good. That's really good.
No.
Well, yeah. So that's our Halloween episode, guys. Thanks
Happy
for
Halloween.
listening. Happy Halloween. Hope you guys don't have any scary stories, but if you do, please leave them in the comments because we would love to hear about them. And we may do a follow up to the Halloween
Yeah.
episode of hearing your scary stories and sharing about them. Thanks for watching, guys.